One of the most pivotal cases you will ever encounter involving the use of deadly force by law enforcement officers is going to be the United States Supreme Court decision in the matter of Tennessee versus Garner. That was a 1985 United States Supreme Court decision, but we need to take it back to 1974 to get a full flavor of exactly what happened that day. It's October 1974. Officer Hyman, Officer Wright with the Memphis Police Department were dispatched to the scene of a call for a prowler. When they arrived at the scene, a neighbor is on the porch. She told Officer Wright and Officer Hyman that their neighbor next door was gone. Nobody was supposed to be in the house, yet she heard somebody rummage around in the house. In fact, she heard them at the current time when they had arrived. Officer Wright stayed on the porch to talk with the neighbor. Officer Hyman left the porch and walked to the back of the neighbor's home just to investigate the matter.
And he sees what he believed to be someone who was between 17 and 19 years old, a black male who's fleeing from the rear of the residence toward the back fence. When he announced his presence and yelled halt, what he said was a crouch. The person crouched at the base of the fence and then leapt to the top of the 6-foot fence to go over it. He had unholstered that revolver at the time and initially had stated that what he fired was a warning shot.
The round struck the suspect in the back of the head. He later died. This individual, it turns out, was 15 years old, 5'4", and weighed between 100 and 110 pounds.
And I believe that the initial knee-jerk statement by Officer Hyman was correct. I think it was a warning shot that just went awry. The planets lined up. Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong, and he struck this child in the back of the head for $10 out of a pocketbook inside the home.
The interesting part about this fact scenario is that Officer Hyman was acting at that time in conformity with Tennessee law. Tennessee law in 1974 justified and authorized the use of all force, to include deadly force, to stop the escape of an individual on which you had probable cause to believe had committed a felony. This was the aspect that the United States Supreme Court took up. When the United States Supreme Court evaluated this matter, their first determination was whether or not a seizure of this suspect, Garner, actually took place. They concluded that yes, indeed it did. A seizure under the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution took place whenever his movement was stopped. In this case, it was stopped by the use of deadly force. The second evaluation was whether or not that was an appropriate application of force. The United States Supreme Court concluded that it was not, that the use of deadly force against a nonviolent, non-threatening suspect who you had probable cause to believe had committed a felony was constitutionally unreasonable. In fact, the United States Supreme Court had a quote that I'd like to read to you now. The use of deadly force to prevent the escape of all felony suspects, whatever the circumstances, is constitutionally unreasonable. It is not better that all felony suspects die than that they escape. Where the suspect poses no immediate threat to the officer and no threat to others, the harm resulting from failing to apprehend him does not justify the use of deadly force to do so. It's no doubt unfortunate when a suspect who is in sight escapes, but the fact that the police arrive a little late or a little slower afoot does not always justify killing the suspect. A police officer may not seize an unarmed, non-dangerous suspect by shooting him dead. That was the ultimate conclusion of the United States Supreme Court. Having said that, did they make allowances for the justification of deadly force in appropriate circumstances? They did indeed. They further went on to explain when deadly force could be authorized. Where the officer has probable cause to believe that the suspect poses a threat of serious physical harm, either to the officer or to others, it is not constitutionally unreasonable to prevent escape by using deadly force. Thus, if the suspect threatens the officer with a weapon, or there is probable cause to believe that he has committed a crime involving the infliction or threatened infliction of serious physical harm, deadly force may be used if necessary to prevent their escape, and if some reasonable warning has been given. Under those circumstances, deadly force could be utilized.